my name is Reverend Sarah Jelena Wolcott, and I run Sequoia Samanvaya, and I am so delighted to be here talking with you today about one of our really core programs around circular time. And I've been teaching this for about 8 years. It became one of the first courses that I taught after the Remembering course. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what is circular time and what is this thing that we've been working on and doing. So at its most basic, circular time is taking the linear, progress-oriented calendar system, which has histories in both the Industrial Revolution and the overarching colonial enterprise, and taking it out of that system and putting it into a cycle or a circle. This is extraordinarily simple. I sometimes talk about this as going from clock time, which has a linear dimension to it, into earth time, which is ecologically orientated. It is a cycle of the earth around the sun. And anyone who goes through basic math understands, or basic science understands that basic rotation of how the earth is cycling around the sun. The sun, of course, it's not just a circle. It's a complex spiraling cycle, because the sun is also moving through space, and the sun is cycling the solar system, and the solar system is cycling the galaxy, and there's just these cycles upon cycles upon cycles that we get to be a part of. How lucky are we to be a part of these complex, multidimensional, space-time relational cycles? And if they're going to put that into a two-dimensional piece of paper, it's kind of helpful to just draw it as a circle. And that kind of gets you to the next space. That gets you to the next level. So that's on this most simple is taking a linear system and putting it into a cyclical system where it has always been and where I would say it belongs. And that spiral combining the linearity and the spirality, the circular and the linear, where you can combine them, that leads to the spiral. And for many people, it's actually the combining of the two systems that's most helpful. I am not saying you should have no linear time part of you whatsoever, or advocating for purely only having cycles. It's really the dance between the linearity and the circularness, cyclicalness, that is so meaningful and powerful and accurate to what's happening at just a pure physical plane level. Okay, so that's the most basic. Part of what I learned, because I started doing this, I started putting my own year in a cycle, and I realized that there are actually two things that were happening here. One of those things has to do with the process that we use, and I'm going to get to that next. And the process is really, really important. And the second piece that is also going on here is the extent to which this changes people's relationship with time and with a lot of things associated with time. There is a level to which we can say that moving into a cyclical way, in a locally ecological way of paying attention to what's happening in your local ecology and how that relates to what's going on in your life, is profound. It is part of an ecological awareness. It is part of decolonization. It is one of the major things that got missed in the overarching separation between people and place that has contributed to so many of the social, ecological, and physical ill health that we have today. It's that disconnection from our environment. It's a disconnection from nature and from knowing where our body cycles are and the natural cycles are. So there's these layers and layers of cycles that our process can help people get a little bit closer to. If you're only thinking about it in that macro level of the earth cycling around the sun, which is super cool, and you don't also notice what's happening in your local ecology, then you're missing a really big point of what time is and what seasons are, how your body is and can respond to its local ecological system. And that knowledge, if you accumulate local ecologically specific knowledge over many, 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 many generations of storytelling and cosmovision building and creating these complex understandings of a particular place, that begins to get to what today we often refer to as traditional ecological knowledge. So cyclical calendar systems are inherent, they're critical dynamics of most, I want to say most, we can loosely say non-Western forms of thinking and cosmovisions. And they are very critical for adapting particularly to changing ecological dynamics. Because what's happening at the local microecological level, how your body's responding to that, and how those things connect, what's growing when, what birds are doing what is the fish doing, what are the plants doing, what's happening up in the sky. All of those things are going to shape how any given local ecosystem is developing. And that includes how we are co-developing with it, because this is a co-evolving, mutual arising process. That's how the larger ecosystem works. So cyclical calendars help us go there. And I've also learned in the process of doing this over many years that our calendars contain within them cosmovisions. And every calendar does it. So one piece of the work, that I've been developing over several years now, has been to understand and to go deeper into what's happening on the level of the national secular calendar, as well as within different religious calendars. And what are these different federal holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, etc.? What are they doing? What are they functioning as? How are they shaping the bigger cosmovision that we are enacting and participating in? And where is as regular everyday people, as well as leaders of institutions and organizations, where is our ability to work with change and create new meanings out of this wider calendar system? Because these are places where there can be powerful change. Now, in the circular time class, we don't get into that part as much. Those, if you're working with me in other ways, there's other kind of moments in the year where we get into those kind of bigger meta questions. But I just kind of want to give you a highlight that it's there. So there's a bunch of stuff happening with what are calendar systems and how are they functioning and how are they shaping consciousness that I've been consistently learning and developing, and that are sort of the underlying bedrock of what this circular time course is all about. And then there's the process that we're using, which is a process that, as I kind of share in how this came to be, is a process of understanding how humans tell stories and make meaning. And the process develops from my own experience and learning in anthropology and psychology and spiritual and religious studies, and how narrative change happens both socially and in the individual self, and my own work as a spiritual director and my own personal journey. All of this is coming out of things that I've developed within my own self first. And so the process that we use, because you can put your year on a circle, and not come up with anything close to the level of results that people do when they go through our program. The circle by itself is cool, but it's actually the steps that we bring people through and the way in which we have our collective times for people to come together and share, and some of the pattern recognition that I bring to these questions that makes this particularly powerful and unique. So our process is a process of understanding what's going on, and then changing your categories that you have for yourself, the categories through which you're making meaning, and then asking a certain set of questions, and then enabling yourself to be received and heard by others. So there's a whole process of engaging with the sacred time that we are alive together, that is really, I think, rooted in lifting up the best of ourselves as well as the best of one another. So there's sort of this fundamentally affirmative and loving spiritual understanding that it is not all for nothing. It is not all for nothing, whatever has happened or hasn't happened. But instead, there's this richness that's there, no matter what has and hasn't happened. And I also like to say that there's always a few moments in life for most people when it's not the right year to reflect. And I want to say that because we forget that. We always assume we should, do the thing. And there are some times in your life, and every now and then I'll come across someone and I'm like, okay, you know what? This year, just keep going. you're in the midst of something really hard. Usually this is because people are in the midst of something really, really, really hard. And this is not a reflection year for you. This is a like, just make it through year for you. And in those moments, like, you just keep going as best as you can day to day. There's other ways you can be engaged. There's other learning you can do. Don't worry. There's going to come a moment where you're going to be ready to do some reflection. And I'd like to suggest that like the awareness that's not always the right time is also really helpful. And that you usually know. You usually know if it's not the right time for you. And you can trust your knowings. And you can trust your intuition. So there's a lot of complexity. I would like to say that I think one of the things that we've done well in these workshops is that by and large, this is a big, complex topic. It can go lots and lots of different directions. And by and large, the feedback we get from most people and most people's experience is once they give themselves a little bit of time to sit with it, it's actually very intuitive and really enjoyable and enables you to kind of bring a tool to a lot of very complex thinking, but it's actually very, very practical and very much applicable to your day-to-day life.